The sound of fabric tearing echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Alexandra Monroe stood frozen, her brand new teaching blazer hanging in shreds from her shoulders, exposing the plain white shirt underneath. Taylor Hendricks, the 6'2" senior who towered over her petite frame, held a piece of the expensive material in his massive hand, twirling it like a trophy. "Oops," he sneered, his football teammates laughing behind him. "Guess they don't make teacher clothes like they used to." But what none of them noticed was the slight shift in her stance. The way her breathing suddenly became controlled and measured her, the faded black belt she wore beneath her remaining clothes, hidden under professional attire that cost her nearly $300 she couldn't afford to lose. Alexandra Monroe had arrived at Westfield High exactly 1 week ago, fresh out of her teaching certification program at 23 years old. She looked even younger barely, 5'3". With strawberry blonde hair she kept in a neat bun and green eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm behind wire-rimmed glasses. Most people mistook her for a student teacher or even a senior herself, which had already caused problems in establishing authority. She'd saved for months to buy professional clothing that might make her look older, more authoritative. That blazer alone had cost $150 money she'd scraped together by eating ramen for weeks. The morning had started promisingly enough. She'd woken up at 5:30 a.m. in her tiny studio apartment, pressing her new outfit carefully and practicing her lesson plan for advanced placement literature. This was her dream job. Even if the inner-city school had a reputation for being rough, she believed in these kids, believed she could make a difference. Her mother had called at 6 a.m., voice worried as always. "Alexandra, honey, are you sure about this school? I saw on the news." But Alex had cut her off gently, assuring her everything would be fine. She'd arrived at 7 a.m. sharp. Nodding to the security guard, who barely glanced up from his newspaper, the hallways smelled like industrial cleaner mixed with teenage anxiety, a scent she was still getting used to. Her classroom, Room 237, was tucked in a corner of the second floor, where the older section of the building met the new wing. The previous teacher had quit mid-semester, leaving behind stacks of ungraded papers and a whiteboard still covered in notes from October. Taylor Hendricks had been her problem from day one. Son of a city councilman and star quarterback, he ruled Westfield High with the kind of casual cruelty that came from never facing consequences. At 18, he was already being scouted by college teams, his future seemingly guaranteed. Regardless of his grades, he'd walked into her first period class 5 minutes late. No apology. And taken his seat in the back like a king claiming his throne. "You must be the new teacher," he'd said, feet up on the desk. "How old are you?" "Like 19. She'd tried to establish boundaries professionally. "It's Miss Monroe, and my age isn't relevant. Please put your feet down." The class had gone silent, waiting to see how this would play out. Taylor had smiled, slowly lowering his feet. But the challenge in his eyes was unmistakable. Every day since had been a test. Small disruptions, whispered comments, paper balls thrown when she turned to write on the board. She'd followed protocol, writing him up, sending him to the office, but nothing changed. Principal Garrison would just send him back with a warning. Sometimes not even that. The breaking point had come that morning. She'd dressed especially carefully, wearing her new navy blazer over a white silk blouse, professional slacks, and low heels. She wanted to look authoritative for the parent-teacher conferences starting that afternoon. The blazer had been her biggest splurge-structured shoulders, quality fabric that actually fit her petite frame properly. When she'd looked in the mirror that morning, she'd finally seen a real teacher. Looking back, Taylor had noticed immediately when she walked into class, "Damn, Monroe trying to look grown-up today." He'd said loud enough for everyone to hear. "What did that cost? Your whole paycheck?" She'd ignored him, beginning her lesson on symbolism in The Great Gatsby, but he wouldn't let it go. Throughout the class, he kept making comments. "Must be nice having daddy's money for fancy clothes. Bet she's trying to impress someone. Maybe if she spent more on the blazer, It wouldn't look so cheap. The final bell had rung at 3:15 p.m., and she'd thought she was safe. She'd stayed after to prepare for the conferences, finally emerging at 4 p.m. to find the hallway mostly empty. That's when Tyler had appeared with two of his teammates, Jake Powell and Marcus Turner. They'd been waiting. "Miss Monroe," Tyler had called out, voice dripping with false politeness. "Nice jacket. Let me get a closer look." She'd tried to walk past them, but they'd formed a wall. Her heart had started racing, but she'd kept her voice steady. "Please move. I need to get to the office. Just want to check the quality," Tyler had said, reaching out. "My mom's a fashion designer. You know. She could tell you if you got ripped off." "Don't touch me," she'd said firmly, trying to sidestep them. But Tyler was faster, grabbing the lapel of her blazer. "Feels pretty cheap to me," he'd said, and then pulled. The sound of tearing fabric had seemed impossibly loud in the empty hallway. The entire right side of her blazer had separated at the seam, the sleeve hanging loose. "Oh shit," Jake had laughed. "Guess it really was cheap." Tyler hadn't stopped there. Emboldened by his friend's laughter and her shocked silence, he'd grabbed the hanging fabric and pulled harder, tearing it further. "See? Real quality wouldn't rip like that." Alexandra had stood there, feeling the cool air against her arms where her blazer no longer covered them. $150. 3 weeks of ramen dinners. Her professional armor, destroyed in seconds by a boy who'd never worried about money in his life. Something inside her had shifted in that moment, not snapped, but crystallized with perfect clarity. "Are you going to cry?" Marcus had taunted. "Little teacher going to run to the principal?" Tuller had stepped closer, still holding the torn fabric. "What are you going to do? Monroe? Give me detention? Write me up again?" He'd laughed. "My dad plays golf with Garrison every Sunday. You think your little reports mean anything?" That's when she'd done something none of them expected. She'd smiled, not a nervous smile or a fake one, but the kind of smile her sensei used to get right before demonstrating a particularly devastating technique. Her hands had moved to her ruined blazer, calmly removing it completely, folding it with precise movements despite its destroyed state. "You know what, Tyler?" she'd said. Her voice, different now, lower, controlled. "You're right. The reports don't mean anything. The system's broken. You've been protected your whole life." "Damn straight." He'd agreed, missing the danger in her tone. "But here's what you don't understand," she'd continued, rolling up the sleeves of her white blouse with deliberate precision. "Sometimes the universe provides its own justice. Sometimes karma doesn't wait." Jake had snorted. "What are you going to do? Lecture us to death?" Alexandra had shifted her weight slightly, her stance widening almost imperceptibly. Only someone with martial arts training would have recognized the subtle preparation. "No lectures. But I am going to teach you something." The hallway had felt different suddenly, charged with an energy the boys couldn't quite identify. Tyler had tried to maintain his bravado, but something in her eyes made him take a half step back. "See, Tyler, you think power comes from who your father is? How big you are? How much money you have?" she'd said, still in that calm, controlled voice. "But real power, real strength, that comes from discipline, from years of training, from learning to control yourself before you try to control others. Whatever." "Psycho," Tyler had said, but his voice had wavered slightly. "Come on, guys. Let's go." "She's lost it." "Not yet," Alexandra had said quietly. "But you tore my blazer." "That blazer cost me $150. Do you know how many hours of tutoring I had to do to afford it? How many meals I skipped?" "Not my problem." Tuller had shrugged, trying to recapture his earlier cockiness. "No," she'd agreed. "It's not, but actions have consequences, Tyler, and I think it's time you learned that lesson." The security cameras in this part of the building had been broken for months, something everyone knew. It was why Tyler had chosen this spot for his ambush, but that worked both ways. "Are you threatening me?" Tyler had asked, trying to sound incredulous, but achieving something closer to nervous. "Threatening? Alexandra had tilted her head. No, threats are what weak people make when they can't back them up. I'm simply informing you that you're about to receive an education in cause and effect. Marcus had laughed nervously. Yo, Tyler, maybe we should go. She's acting weird. But Tyler's pride wouldn't let him back down, especially not from a woman half his size. What are you going to do? Monroe, hit me? Go ahead. Hit a student. See how fast you lose your job. Hit you? Alexandra had actually laughed then, a sound that made all three boys shift uncomfortably. Oh, Tyler, I'm not going to hit you. That would be assault. I'm simply going to defend myself when you inevitably make the mistake of trying to intimidate me physically again. I haven't touched you. Tyler had said quickly. Not yet. She'd agreed. But we both know you will. Boys like you always do. You can't help yourself. When words fail, when you feel your power slipping, you resort to physical intimidation? It's predictable. She'd been right. Of course, Tyler had lasted maybe 30 seconds before her calm confidence had enraged him enough to act. He'd reached out, intending to grab her shoulder, to shake her maybe, to reassert his dominance through size and strength. That's when everything had changed. The moment his hand had moved toward her, Alexandra had shifted. It wasn't dramatic or flashy, just a subtle pivot that put her at the perfect angle. Her hand had come up, deflecting his grab with a circular motion that redirected his momentum. Tyler had stumbled forward, off balance, confused. That's assault? She'd said calmly. I'm now defending myself. What followed had been a lesson in physics, leverage, and years of dedicated training. Tyler had tried to recover, swinging wildly, but Alexandra had moved like water. Each attack had been redirected. Each attempt to use his size advantage turned against him. She hadn't struck him not once. Instead, she'd used his own force to send him stumbling into lockers, tripping over his own feet, spinning in circles like a drunk dancer. Jake and Marcus had watched in shocked silence as their leader, the mighty Tyler Hendricks, was systematically humiliated by a woman who weighed maybe 110 pounds. Every time he'd lunged, she'd stepped aside at the last second. Every time he'd tried to grab her, she'd used circular motions to escape while leaving him grasping air. Stop moving, Tyler had roared, face red with exertion and embarrassment. Stop attacking, she'd countered, still breathing evenly while he panted like a winded bull. The dance had continued for what felt like hours but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. By the end, Tyler was exhausted, his shirt soaked with sweat, his perfect hair hanging in his face. He'd finally stopped, hands on his knees, breathing hard. How? He'd gasped out. Alexandra had straightened her blouse, still perfectly composed except for a few wrinkles. 15 years of karate. Tyler. Started when I was 8. Black belt at 16. Could have gone professional. But I wanted to teach. She'd paused. Different kind of teaching than you expected. I imagine. The hallway had been silent, except for Tyler's heavy breathing. Jake and Marcus had pressed themselves against the lockers, afraid to move, afraid to draw her attention. Here's what's going to happen, Alexandra had said, her teacher voice returning but with a new edge of authority. You're going to pay for my blazer, $150. Cash. Tomorrow morning on my desk. Or what? Tyler had tried for defiance, but it came out as a wheeze. Or I file a police report for assault and destruction of property. She'd said simply, the security cameras might be broken, but your friends here witnessed everything. And something tells me they're not as eager to lie to police as they are to school administrators. She'd looked at Jake and Marcus then, and they'd both quickly nodded their agreement. Additionally, she'd continued, you're going to start attending my class. Really attending, participating, doing the work, showing respect, not just to me, but to your classmates. You can't, I can, she'd interrupted, because here's the thing, Tyler, I could have hurt you. Badly. Every technique I used was designed to neutralize without injury, but I know dozens of ways to cause serious damage. I chose not to. That's what real power Is shaving the ability to destroy someone and choosing mercy instead. She'd picked up her ruined blazer then, holding it almost tenderly. This blazer represented something to me. Professional respect. Being taken seriously. You tried to take that away. She'd looked him in the eye. But respect isn't something you wear. It's something you earn. And starting tomorrow, you're going to learn what that means. Tyler had known, all fight gone from him. The mighty had fallen, and everyone present knew it. Oh, and Tyler? She'd added as she'd turned to leave. If you or your friends ever try to physically intimidate me or any other teacher again, I won't be so gentle. I might accidentally forget some of my control. Understood? Yes. Ma'am, he'd whispered. Miss Munro. She'd corrected. I'm Miss Munro. As she'd walked away, leaving 3 stunned boys in her wake, Alexandra had felt something shift in the universe. She'd stood up not just for herself, but for every teacher who'd been disrespected, every professional who'd been dismissed for being young or small or female. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sword would spread. Dynamics would shift. Consequences would unfold. But for now, in this moment, she'd won something important. The blazer could be replaced. Her dignity, once surrendered, could not. And Tyler Hendricks had just learned that the hard way. Word traveled through Westfield High like wildfire in a drought. By 7 a.m. the next morning, there wasn't a single student who hadn't heard some version of what happened in the East Hallway. The stories grew with each telling. In some versions, Miss Monroe had thrown Tyler through a window. In others, she'd revealed she was secretly a ninja. But Marcus Turner, unable to keep his mouth shut, had posted a shaky video he'd managed to capture on his phone during the last 30 seconds of the encounter. The footage was blurry and partial, but it clearly showed Tyler Hendricks, the untouchable football star, stumbling around like a toddler while the petite English teacher calmly evaded every attempt to grab her. Alexandra arrived at school at 6:45 am, wearing her backup outfit, simple black cardigan over a gray dress, not as professional as her ruined blazer, but it would have to do. She'd spent the previous evening on the phone with her mother, assuring her that yes, she was fine, and no, she wasn't going to lose her job. But honey, you used karate on a student? Her mother had fretted. I used defensive techniques to protect myself from assault. Mom, there's a difference. The parking lot was fuller than usual for this early hour. She noticed students loitering near the entrance, obviously waiting to catch a glimpse of her. As she walked through the front doors, conversation stopped. Eyes followed her movement. Someone started a slow clap that quickly died when she turned to look. AGZ. Principal Garrison was waiting outside her classroom, his usually relaxed face creased with concern. Harold Garrison was 55, with silver hair and the tired eyes of a man who'd been in education too long to be idealistic, but not long enough to stop caring entirely. Miss Monroe, he said, gesturing toward his office. We need to talk. She'd expected this. Of course. His office smelled like coffee and old leather, decorated with photos of championship teams from years when Westfield High had been a different place. He closed the door and gestured for her to sit. I've had 3 phone calls already this morning, he began, settling behind his desk. One from Tyler Hendricks Sr., one from a school board member, and one from a parent who says you're some kind of martial arts champion who's been hiding your identity. I never hid anything, Alexandra said calmly. My martial arts background isn't relevant to teaching English literature. It became relevant yesterday when you used it on a student. When I defended myself against assault, she corrected, Tyler destroyed my property and then attempted to physically intimidate me. I have 2 witnesses. Garrison rubbed his temples. Jake Powell's father called to say his son is too traumatized to come to school today. Apparently, the boy had nightmares about ninja teachers. Despite everything, Alexandra had to suppress a smile. That seems like an overreaction. Miss Monroe Alexandra. Garrison leaned forward. Help me understand what happened. The security footage from that hallway has been broken for months. So all I have are conflicting accounts. She told him everything, calmly and precisely. The harassment that had been building, the destruction of her blazer, Tyler's attempt to physically intimidate her, and her measured response. She emphasized that she never struck him, only redirected his own aggressive movements. When she finished, Garrison was quiet for a long moment. $150 for a blazer? It was an investment in professional appearance, she said. I saved for 2 months. He nodded slowly. And you're expecting Tyler to pay for it? Actions have consequences. That's a lesson he clearly hasn't learned at home. His father is threatening to sue the district. Says you assaulted his son. Then I'll counter-sue for assault and destruction of property. Alexandra replied evenly. I think we both know which case has more merit. Garrison studied Hare. This wasn't the nervous young teacher who'd walked into his office just a week ago. Something had crystallized in her. A quiet strength that reminded him why he'd hired her despite her inexperience. What do you want me to do here? Alexandra? Your job, she said simply. Apply the rules equally, regardless of who a student's father is. Tyler assaulted a teacher in any other district. That would be immediate expulsion. This isn't any other district. Tyler Hendricks Sr. donated $50,000 to our athletic program last year, and that's exactly the problem. Alexandra stood. If you'll excuse me, I have a class to prepare for. Alexandra. She paused at the door. With all due respect, Principal Garrison, you have a choice to make. You can continue enabling Tyler's behavior because of his father's money, or you can send a message that teachers in this school have value beyond their ability to be pushed around. The decision is yours. But the whole school is watching. She left him sitting there, staring at his championship photos from better days. Her classroom was packed when she arrived, not just with her first period students, but with kids who should have been in other classes. They fell silent as she entered, watching her like she might suddenly break into a martial arts demonstration. Anyone here who doesn't belong in AP literature needs to leave, she said, setting down her bag. Now, there was a scramble for the door. When only her actual students remained, she noticed 3 empty seats. Tyler, Jake, and Marcus. Before we begin, she said, moving to stand in front of her desk. Let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I have martial arts training. No, I'm not secretly a ninja or an undercover cop or whatever else is being said. I'm an English teacher who happens to have a black belt. Moving on, a hand shot up. Brittany Chen, one of her brightest students. Miss Monroe, is it true you made Tyler cry? I made Tyler tired. Alexandra corrected. And hopefully, I made him think. Now, who can tell me about the symbolism we discussed yesterday in Chapter 4? The class proceeded almost normally, though she caught students stealing glances at her, perhaps trying to reconcile the woman discussing metaphors with the one from Marcus's video. 20 minutes into the period, the door opened and Tyler Hendricks walked in. The class went dead silent. He looked different. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something almost humble. In his hand was a white envelope. He walked to her desk without making eye contact with anyone and placed the envelope down carefully. $150, he said quietly. Cash. Alexandra picked up the envelope, looked inside, then nodded. Thank you. Take your seat. Miss Monroe? His voice was uncertain. I also wanted to say, he struggled with the words, clearly uncomfortable with public apology. I'm sorry. About the blazer. About everything. The classroom was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights humming. Apology accepted. Alexandra said, now take your seat. We're discussing symbolism in Gatsby. Tyler moved to his usual spot in the back, but then seemed to think better of it. He took an empty seat in the second row instead. Marcus and Jake, who had slipped in behind him, followed suit. Page 94. Alexandra continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Who wants to read? To everyone's shock, Tyler raised his hand. The rest of the day was surreal. News of Tyler's apology and payment spread even faster than the original story. Students who had never acknowledged her existence suddenly nodded respectfully in the halls. Teachers who had barely spoken to her stopped to introduce themselves properly. During lunch, she found herself sitting with Janet Rodriguez, a veteran history teacher who'd been at Westfield for 20 years. In 2 decades, Janet said, shaking her head. I've never seen anything like this. Do you know how many teachers Tyler has driven to quit? I can imagine. 3. In just his junior year, admin always took his side, always made excuses. Janet leaned in. What you did yesterday? That was 20 years of teacher frustration getting its justice. I just defended myself. Alexandra said, No. Janet smiled. You stood up? There's a difference. By 6th period, Alexandra noticed other changes. Students were arriving on time. Phones were staying in pockets, and the casual disrespect that had been commonplace was notably absent. It wasn't fear, exactly more like a recalibration of understanding. After school, she was gathering her things when a knock came at her door. A girl she didn't recognize stood there, nervously freshman, maybe sophomore. Miss Monroe? I'm Elise Patterson. I wanted to thank you. For what? For what you did to Tyler? The girl's voice dropped. He and his friends have been making my life hell since I started here. But today, he actually apologized to me. Said he was reassessing his behavior or something. Alexandra felt something warm bloom in her chest. That's good to hear. Elise, is it true you're starting a self-defense club? What? No. Because a lot of us would join, especially the girls. We're tired of feeling helpless. After Elise left, Alexandra sat at her desk thinking she'd come here to teach literature, to share her love of words and stories, but maybe there were different kinds of teaching, different ways to make a difference. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Miss Monroe, this is Tyler. Could we talk after practice tomorrow? I want to understand what happened. How you did what you did. Tendis. She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, Room 237, 4 p.m. The next afternoon, Tyler showed up exactly on time. He'd showered after practice, but still looked tired from what must have been a grueling session. He stood in her doorway uncertainly. Come in, she said. Sit. He took the chair across from her desk, looking uncomfortable in the role of supplicant. I couldn't sleep last night, he admitted. I kept replaying it in my head. You're half my size. I'm stronger, faster, younger. But you made me look like a fool. No, Alexandra corrected. You made yourself look like a fool? I just didn't stop you. He nodded slowly. My dad says I should sue. Says you assaulted me. What do you think? Tyler was quiet for a moment. I think I've been an asshole my whole life, and nobody ever called me on it before. He looked up at her. How long have you been training? 15 years? Could you teach me? Alexandra raised an eyebrow. Teach you karate? Teach me. Control. Discipline. Whatever it is that lets you stay so calm while I was losing my mind. She studied him. Was this real change or just another game? But there was something in his ISA vulnerability she'd never seen before. The dojo I train at is on Maple Street, she said finally. Sensei Williams teaches beginners on Tuesdays and Thursdays. 6 p.m. You won't teach me yourself? I'm your English teacher. Tyler, that's the relationship we need to maintain. But if you're serious about learning martial arts, Sensei Williams is excellent. He nodded, standing to leave. At the door, he paused. Miss Monroe, yesterday, when you had me completely beaten, you could have hurt me, really hurt me. Why didn't you? Because that's not what strength is for, she said simply. After he left, Alexandra sat in her empty classroom as the sun slanted through the windows. She thought about power, who had it, who wielded it, and what it really meant. Tyler had learned that physical strength without discipline was just bullying. But perhaps more importantly, he'd learned that true power sometimes came in unexpected packages. Her phone rang, Principal Garrison. Alexandra. I've made my decision. I've spoken to the board and to Tyler's father. While there won't be formal disciplinary action since you've chosen not to press charges, I've made it clear that any further harassment of teachers will result in immediate suspension, regardless of who the student is. That's a start, she said. I've also approved your proposal. What proposal? The one I'm assuming you're about to submit for a voluntary self-defense class for students and staff. Janet Rodriguez mentioned the idea to me. Alexandra smiled. I'll have it on your desk by Monday. One more thing. Garrison's voice grew serious. Tyler's father wants to meet with you. I told him it would be your choice. When? He's in my office now. Alexandra felt her pulse quicken slightly, but her breathing remained steady. I'll be right there. Tuller Hendricks Sr. was exactly what she'd expected. Tall, broad, with the same jaw as his son, but carrying an extra 20 years of arrogance. He stood when she entered, but didn't offer his hand. So you're the teacher who attacked my son? He said. I'm the teacher your son attacked. She corrected calmly. Would you like to see the receipt for the blazer he destroyed? His face reddened. Now listen here. No? Alexandra interrupted, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had stopped Tyler Jr. in his tracks. You listen? Your son has been terrorizing students and teachers at this school for years because you've taught him that money and size equal power. Yesterday, he learned differently. You could have seriously injured him. I could have, she agreed. Instead, I gave him the greatest gift anyone's ever given him: consequences for his actions and a chance to change. You should be thanking me. Hendricks Sr. looked like he'd been slapped. Thanking you? Your son came to me today asking to learn discipline. Real discipline. For the first time in his life, he's questioning who he is and who he wants to be. That's growth. That's what education really is. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Now, if you want to sue me for defending myself against assault, that's your choice. But I think we both know how that will play out. Or you can accept that your son is getting a second chance to become a better man than the one you raised him to be. She left both men sitting in stunned silence. The weeks that followed were transformative. Tyler not only attended the dojo regularly, but became one of Sensei Williams's most dedicated students in class. He participated thoughtfully, his essays showing genuine engagement with the material. The change was so dramatic that other teachers began asking Alexandra what she'd done. The Self-Defense Club launched with 40 students and 5 staff members. Alexandra taught basic awareness and defensive techniques. But more importantly, she taught confidence. She watched shy freshmen learn to stand taller, saw victims of bullying find their voices. One evening after club, Elise Patterson stayed behind. She'd been one of the most committed members, never missing a session. Miss Monroe, she said, I stood up to Brady Coleman today. He tried to corner me by my locker like he always does. But I used that stance you taught us and told him to back off. And he did. How did that feel? Like I mattered. Like I had power too. You always had power. Elise, you just needed to learn how to access it. As November turned to December, Alexandra noticed the entire atmosphere of Westfield High shifting. It wasn't just about her, though. The story of the tiny English teacher who'd taken down the school bully had become legend. It was about what that moment had revealed. That the old order wasn't inevitable. That change was possible. That standing up for yourself was an option. Other teachers began asserting themselves more. Students who'd been silent started speaking up. The culture of intimidation that had ruled the school was crumbling, replaced by something more equitable. On a snowy Thursday, Tyler approached her after class with his latest essay and analysis of power dynamics in Lord of the Flies that was surprisingly insightful. This is excellent work, she told him. I've been thinking a lot about power lately, he admitted. Real versus perceived, earned versus inherited. And what have you concluded? That I had it all backwards. I thought fear was respect. I thought size was strength. He paused. Sensei Williams says I might be ready to test for my yellow belt next month. That's wonderful. Tyler, Miss Monroe? I've been wanting to ask when you took off that ruined blazer, right before everything happened. What were you thinking? Alexandra considered the question. I was thinking that I had two choices. I could let that moment define me as a victim, or I could define the moment myself. I chose the second option. Yeah, Tyler said quietly. I think I understand that now. The last day before winter break, Alexandra found a package on her desk. Inside was a blazer navy blue, perfectly tailored, clearly expensive. The note read, Miss Monroe, this doesn't make up for the one I destroyed, but I wanted you to have something that represents what you taught me, that real strength comes from within. But it doesn't hurt to look professional on the outside, too. Tyler P. S. My mom really is a fashion designer. She helped me pick this out. Alexandra held up the blazer, noting the perfect fit, the quality construction, but more than that, she saw what it represented: a bridge rebuilt, a lesson learned, a future different from the past. During the faculty holiday party, Principal Garrison pulled her aside. Enrollment for your AP Literature class next semester is up 300%, he said, and applications for the Self-Defense Club have exceeded our capacity. That's good to hear. Alexandra, I owe you an apology. When you first came here, I saw another idealistic young teacher who'd burn out in a year. I didn't support you the way I should have. You're supporting me now, she said. That's what matters. The board wants to expand your self-defense program. Make it part of the physical education curriculum. Interested? Very. As the party continued around them, Garrison grew thoughtful. You know, in 25 years of education, I've seen a lot of different approaches to dealing with bullies. Zero tolerance, mediation, counseling. But what you did, meeting strength with strength, then choosing mercy, that was something new. It's not new, Alexandra said. It's ancient. The martial arts teach that the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemy, but in turning them into an ally. Well, you certainly did that with Tyler. Tyler turned himself into an ally. I just showed him the door. That evening, as Alexandra packed up her classroom for the break, she found herself thinking about transformations. Her own, from nervous new teacher to respected authority. Tyler's, from bully to student. The school's, from a place ruled by fear to one discovering mutual respect. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Saw the news story about your school's anti-bullying program. So proud of you. Honey, Dad would have been too. Alexandra smiled. Touching the black belt she now wore openly over her dress. Her father had been the one to enroll her in karate after she'd been bullied in elementary school. Don't be a victim, he'd said, but don't be a bully either. Be a protector. It had taken 15 years, but she'd finally understood what he meant. Another message, this one from Janet Rodriguez. Winter break faculty party at O'Malley's tomorrow night. You're buying the first round hero teacher rules. Then one from Tyler. Sensei says I'm progressing faster than any student he's had. Thank you for showing me the way. And finally, one from Elise. Miss Median Heaven Lisses Breedvers Dataron. M. My little sister wants to join the defense club next semester. She says she wants to be strong like you. Just thought you should know you're kind of her hero. Mine too. Alexandra locked her classroom door and walked through the quiet hallways of Westfield High. In September, these halls had felt hostile. 2. Bison Ever Commerce and N2 by 2. Now they felt like home. She passed the spot where Tyler had torn her blazer, that moment of crisis that had become a catalyst for change. Outside, snow was falling softly, blanketing the world in white. A fresh start, a clean slate. As she walked to her car, Alexandra saw a group of students building a snowman in the courtyard. Tyler was among them, laughing with kids he probably wouldn't have even noticed 3 months ago. He saw her and waved. Miss Monroe, happy holidays. Happy holidays. Tyler. She drove home through the snowy streets, thinking about the blazer in her back seat, new one Tyler had given her. Tomorrow she'd wear it to the faculty party. But it wouldn't define her any more than the torn one had. Clothes were just fabric. Real strength. Real authority. Real respect, those came from within. Her phone rang through her car speakers. Principal Garrison again. Alexandra, sorry to bother you, but I just got off the phone with the superintendent. She wants to implement your program district-wide. Would you be willing to train teachers from other schools? Of course. There's a significant salary increase involved, and they're talking about creating a new position, director of student safety and empowerment. Interested? Alexandra smiled as she pulled into her apartment complex. 6 months ago, she'd been eating ramen to save for a blazer, hoping students would take her seriously. Now she was being offered a position that could change the culture of an entire district. Very interested, she said. Great. We'll talk more after break. And Alexandra, that boy Marcus posted a new video today. The full recording from that day, it's already got 50,000 views. The comments are, well, let's just say you've become something of a symbol. A symbol of what? Standing up, fighting back, choosing mercy. Take your pick. After they hung up, Alexandra sat in her car for a moment, watching the snow fall. She thought about symbols and strength, about power and transformation, about a torn blazer that had revealed so much more than just fabric. Her phone buzzed one more time. An email from a publisher. Miss Monroe, we've been following your story with great interest. Would you consider writing a book about your experience? We believe your approach to conflict resolution could help educators nationwide. Alexandra laughed out loud. The sound, bright in the winter evening. From victim to victor to teacher to author, life had a funny way of taking your worst moments and turning them into your greatest opportunities. She grabbed the new blazer from the back seat and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, she'd call her mother, practice her forms, and maybe start outlining that book. After all, everyone had a story. Hers just happened to involve a torn blazer, a hidden black belt, and a lesson in true power that changed everything. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Alexandra made a mental note to increase her ramen budget. With the salary increase, she could finally afford real food. But she'd keep one package in her cupboard, a reminder of where she'd been and how far she'd come. The torn blazer had been destroyed, but from its ruins, something far more valuable had been built. Respect, community, and the knowledge that sometimes the smallest person in the room could cast the longest shadow. Tyler Hendricks had ripped her blazer, but in doing so, he'd revealed her strength. And that revelation had changed not just their lives, but the life of an entire school. Sometimes the best teachers were the ones who taught lessons that couldn't be found in any textbook. Alexandra Monroe had written her lesson in actions rather than words, in choices rather than chapters. And her students, all of them, had finally learned to read between the lines. 6 months later, Alexandra stood before a packed auditorium at the state education conference. She wore the navy blazer Tyler had given her, now paired with the confidence that came from knowing she'd earned every bit of respect in that room. The PowerPoint behind her showed statistics. Bullying incidents down 78% across the 5 schools that had implemented her program, teacher retention up 40%. And student satisfaction scores at an all-time high. The question I get asked most often, she said, clicking to the next slidey, a photo of her original torn blazer that had gone viral, is whether I regret what happened that day, whether I wish I'd handled it differently, more traditionally, more politically correctly. She paused, scanning the audience of educators, administrators, and policymakers. In the third row, she spotted Tyler Hendricks, now a freshman at State University, wearing his yellow belt proudly. He'd asked to attend to hear her tell their story. I don't regret it, she continued, because that moment taught us all that sometimes the system fails. Sometimes the traditional channels don't work. And when that happens, we have a choice. Accept defeat or find another way? A hand went up. But Miss Monroe, aren't you concerned about encouraging vigilante justice in schools? I'm not encouraging vigilantism. Alexandra replied, I'm encouraging empowerment. There's a difference between seeking conflict and refusing to be victimized. What I did that day wasn't about violence. It was about boundaries. Tyler crossed mine, and I showed him where they were, from his seat. Tyler stood up. May I say something? Alexandra nodded, and he made his way to the front. The audience murmured they knew who he was from the articles. I was the worst kind of bully, Tyler said, his voice steady but emotional. I used my size, my father's money, my social status to make people miserable. Miss Monroe didn't just stop Mesh, saved me from myself, from becoming someone even worse. He turned to look at her. That torn blazer, it represents the moment my whole worldview got ripped apart, and I'm grateful every day that it did. The applause was thunderous. As Tyler returned to his seat, Alexandra noticed him wipe his eyes. Growth, she thought, was often painful but always beautiful. After the conference, she found a quiet moment to check her phone. A message from Elise Patterson made her smile. Got my blue belt today. And guess what? I'm starting college next year, criminal justice major. I want to help people like you helped me. Another from Janet Rodriguez. Just used your de-escalation technique on an aggressive parent. Worked like a charm. You've changed how we all think about conflict. And finally, one from her mother. Watching your speech online, your father would be so proud. His little girl became a warrior and a teacher. The perfect combination. As Alexandra packed up her presentation materials, she thought about that scared young teacher who'd walked into Westfield High just over a year ago. That woman had believed strength meant keeping your head down, avoiding conflict, trying to fit in. But sometimes, true strength meant standing up, speaking out, and showing others that they could do the same. The torn blazer had been the catalyst, but the real transformation had come from within, and that transformation had rippled outward, touching lives across the state and beyond. One moment of standing up had become a movement of standing together,